Good afternoon, and welcome to the first of what will be quarterly virtual newsroom events themed State of Innovation. I'm Rebecca Troyer, Editor-in-Chief of Denver Business Journal. This first State of Innovation event is timed with Colorado Inno's annual Startups to Watch program. Colorado Inno is a sister site to Denver Business Journal and is part of a growing network of sites currently in 14 markets, committed to covering and connecting local technology, startups, growth, and innovation. Colorado Inno has recently become integrated with DBJ, and as a result, we'll be working together to help unite the leaders of today with the rising leaders and businesses of tomorrow. This discussion is our joint kickoff for 2021. From established companies to growing startups and even venture capitalists, 2020 served as a crucial lesson in the unpredictability associated with building a successful venture. While many began last year with grand plans for the months ahead, those plans were quickly thrown into flux. Being able to pivot and be agile became the popular buzzwords in startup circles. But even though they've been used a lot, those terms were a reality for companies, big and small. To look back at the challenges of 2020 and the hopes and aspirations for 2021, we've brought together a panel of experts from all stages of the local startup ecosystem. They'll offer insights from the perspective of early stage entrepreneurs, established players, and investors. Our first panelist is Abby Mercado, CEO and co-founder of Best Shot, a companion in fertility treatments, providing medication and management and education, streamlining the pharmaceutical ordering experience, and enabling safe, supportive micro-communities led by experts. Next, we have Greg Keller, CTO at JumpCloud. Before becoming CTO, Greg served as Chief Strategy Officer for a year and Chief Product Officer at JumpCloud for over 4 years, helping create and bring the first cloud directory service to market. Finally, we have Judy Zhu, partner at the Fund Rockies and founder and CEO, Money Girls. Judy is a seasoned operating tech executive, a tech investor, and a longtime advocate for diversity in business and tech. Prior to landing here in Colorado, Zhu held executive roles with Uber and Quidsi, an online retailer that was acquired by Amazon for $500 million in 2010. Lastly, I'd like to thank our Startups to Watch event sponsor, Amica. With more than a century of business know-how to their name, Amica is the oldest mutual insurer of automobiles in the country. They also offer home, marine, personal umbrella, liability, and life insurance products. Their employees are the key to providing exceptional service to our local policyholders. Most importantly, they support local innovators like yourselves, so please check them out. Now I'm going to kick it over to Nick Greenhalgh, Tech and Innovation Reporter for Denver Business Journal and Colorado Inno, and he'll kick off the panel discussion.
Awesome, thank you, Rebecca, appreciate it. And thank you to all of our panelists for joining in today's discussion and for all of the event attendees for joining us and listening in. Before we get into the questions, we'd love to kick it around to our panelists just to further introduce themselves, add a little bit more context to who they are and what they're doing, and then we'll get into the questions I have. So Greg, if you want to kick us off here and just introduce yourself a little further.
Sure, I'm happy to. Great to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about our community. I'm Greg Keller. I'm the company's CTO. JumpCloud is a Colorado born and raised organization that focuses on the identity and access management and device management world. And you don't, I mean, the resume has 25 years of in the trenches building software and companies. So we'll leave it at that.
Great. Judy, go ahead.
Judy Zhu, just like Greg said, really honored to have the chance to meet all of you guys. I moved to Denver about 2 years ago, and since I've been here, it's been such an amazing community, especially after 8 brutal years in Silicon Valley. And so any opportunity to foster the ecosystem here in any way, whether it's to invest in it, to build within it, or opportunities like this is just such a pleasure.
Awesome. Abby, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me. I'm sure this will be a ton of fun. I started Best Shot not earlier this year, last year in January, and it's been such an adventure. I was in the venture capital investing world prior to that, and moved here about 10 years ago from New York City, where I was working on Wall Street. So thanks again, Nick.
Absolutely. As Rebecca mentioned in the intro, this past year was so challenging for so many in so many different ways. I find myself, or found myself at the end of last year and even into the start of this year being reflective on everything that sort of occurred and everything that I took away from that. So I'll kick us off here with something that's reflective on 2020 and also forward thinking as we look forward to the rest of 2021. What lessons did each of you learn last year that you'll take with you as we go forward into this year? And Abby, you can kick us off here.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this was from investing in startups to actually having my own startup that I'm running. It's, resilience has always been key. So just making sure that you're able to, things can turn on a dime with any startup. You can have a change in the regulatory environment. You can have a competitor start doing what you're doing, an incumbent to start doing what you're doing as well. But I don't think anyone expected a global pandemic for us to all have to deal with. So, it was definitely a year of resiliency. But, for Best Shot, it was resiliency that had to have been just powered by creativity. So, we went through Techstars. We launched the business through Techstars Boulder in early 2020, and we went remote very quickly, and we had to totally pivot after just completing the product that we had built, our MVP. So we spent 3 months building the product, and then fertility clinics who we sell to, they closed for 60 days. And we looked at ourselves, we looked at our technology team, and we said, hey, we have an amazing team. We have a market that is huge and that is in desperate need of technology and software solutions. Who can we help, and how can we help them? So we ended up taking a quick pivot to small group therapy for fertility patients, heavily diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and just a market where therapy is so needed, and mental health challenges are huge. And I know that because I've been through it. I was a former IVF patient, current mom of twins, and we ended up hosting a small group therapy pilot. And after a couple of months, 4 of the 5 patients that we hosted were pregnant. So that was the goal. We were very much resilient, and we thought creatively about a solution, and we ended up pivoting back to our med management product. But it was certainly, we certainly took a lot of learnings from 2020 that will definitely carry into 2021.
Great. Yeah, Greg, I'll kick it over to you. Same question.
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin in terms of the lessons, both, those that have been learned inside of my house with my beautiful wife and our sons, to this business that, I've been building over the last 6+ years. I'll keep it to the business side of things, but I think the basic thing that we observed and the lessons to take away are sound models matter. Trust your model. And in our case, we knew that, things would change. What our company went through and the lessons that I will take away, God forbid any other pandemic comes, but just as a battle-ready set of plans, is to threat model your business, economic threat model, I should say. So we went through an extensive strategy roughly in March when we saw this occurring, the sort of, the looming sort of set of issues that COVID-19 was sort of exacerbating across the entire world. We went through threat modeling of the business and what could possibly happen. We trusted the financial model that we built and the growth model that we built, and we stayed true to it. We didn't have, we didn't I don't want to say need to pivot, but we just grounded our employees. We had them trust the model, and we just put our heads down and went through this moment. At least the first quarter of that was impactful. because many of our customers suffered from the pandemic and they laid off, and our business is built upon user counts and those kinds of things from a unit of economic standpoint. But we braved through it. We knew exactly what to expect. And the mission of that threat modeling we did was, how do we ensure every single employee at our company is safe? And how do we actually grow? Like that, those were the lessons. And that was the kind of modeling that we did. And we came out of this with 2 of our most successful quarters and a radical set of new folks that we never would have had the opportunity to come across their paths, and now they're proud JumpCloudians. So the lessons learned, again, if I just dot the I, cross the T, are do not blink, do not shake your hand, in terms of like showing anything, and give your employee base confidence and trust your models. I mean, that was the lesson that I was so proud of.
That's great. Really appreciate that insight. Judy, take us home on this one.
I love that. I mean, I love how both Abby and Greg shared very specific instances in their business experiences in 2020. I think for me, it's really about daring to reprioritize, this idea of reprioritization, and not worrying that if you pivot, if you do things differently, that it's a lack of stick-to-itness or anything like that. I mean, I think, reprioritizing what's worth paying attention to has been a big lesson for me. Every company that I've met or I've spoken with, every single one of them has done things very differently, right? If you think about how, like, most of us here in tech especially are so fortunate that, and yet we probably still have our own personal private pain. And so reimagining like the structurally unfortunate people in the way that they've had to really rethink things and redo things. It's such a cold water of understanding like the necessity and then the courage to reprioritize and think about like what can you control and what can you not, knowing the difference. I think as an entrepreneur is especially being really clear about what I cannot control, I hope gives me more like longevity. I think about things all in terms of mental longevity. If I give up mentally, then it's just a goner. So that's the main thing. And I think the other thing is, which has been both business and personal, is always structuring things that you can look forward to. Certainly breaking down milestones into teeny tiny little weekly, monthly kind of things for you to achieve and be able to give yourself a pat on the back. But I think I've done the most like personal milestones of the date nights, the whatevers, that I've rewarded myself in probably the most brutal year. That's the least worthy of celebrating. And I think that's been, in retrospect, pretty healthy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sort of building off that point, of those small pats on the back and those small successes, I think one of the things that's important after a year so challenging as 2020 is to really hone in and recognize, the brighter moments of what was a really challenging year. So Judy, I'll kick it right back to you here. Would love to hear your thoughts on some of your brightest moments in 2020, or some of the brightest moments you experienced in the past year.
Yeah, I mean, my brighter moments probably are twofold. One is a little bit maybe counterintuitive. The first one is that it was such a brutal year, but from an opportunities perspective, there was actually a lot going on in terms of the things that I was looking at. My husband equally, he sold a company, a PE-backed company, to another one. And if you think about in our regular world, when you've got two people working dual income, one is like, starting a company, the other one is selling a company. If we were traveling and in a normal world, we would never see each other, right? Like ever. It would be the hardest year ever. And yet we're both squeezing like the half-hour, dinner time, then the 30-minute, very brutal bedtime, but like the quick morning minute in the morning. And so like we ended up being able to completely survive and do pretty well, I think. One of our busier years professionally because of pandemic. And so that's been pretty bright. And then, I am a social animal like through and through. And I think, I've actually been able to do pretty well in whether it's events like this or then, following up. And so I think the brighter moments have been that from a social perspective and from just a connectivity perspective, it's been pretty good.
Great. Yeah, Abby, same question. You mentioned it a little bit in the previous question, but love to hear some of your brighter moments of 2020, both personally and on the business side.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I do on the personal side, I echo what Judy's saying. It's been wonderful to just be home with my family. That's really been a blessing in disguise. And to just kind of give a shout out to the working mom. I have 21-month-old twins, and if I had been traveling to see, like, I've pitched probably 100 fertility clinics. Like, I'm the CEO, the VP of sales, and lots of other things, the IT guy. But if I had flown out to see all of those clinics, it would have been a bit of a different year. So I'm so happy that digital health and the healthcare industry in particular has really embraced Zoom technology or GoToMeeting or what have you. So I think that's been a bright spot in my year. I've seen my kids grow a year, and it's been wonderful to see that firsthand. On the business side, I started 2020 with no job, no salary. I still have no salary, and no co-founder. And as of today, we have built a product, and we have 5 clinics who are working with us, and 2 major academic centers, the 4th largest fertility clinic in the state of Pennsylvania, one of the top clinics in Colorado, and a top 5 clinic network in the US. So we have incredible traction, and it has been just so amazing to actually see a healthcare product work in a healthcare center. You don't see that often in this industry, and it's been a lot of fun to just buck the trend and see the healthcare industry actually kind of get there in terms of embracing telemedicine, and we're selling a flavor of that. So
fantastic. Greg, I'll let you give us one more bright note before we move on.
I mean, I echo the sentiments. Just the home life experience has, been awesome. Like, I have a teenager, one who's in a gap year, pre-planned miraculously before COVID, before he heads off to CSU, and a junior in high school. And having them at the dinner table is mind-blowing, because it's typically, we're out of here, we'll go eat Taco Bell, it's like what teens do. And so that has been magic. And now they prefer just being home, and the cadence of that is like, we've got time back, it's magical. On the business tip, there's lots of cool things. As I was sitting here listening to everyone, I'm like, thinking of all these memories. Like, we have these insanely beautiful offices we just built in Denver and in Louisville, like 60,000 square feet, and we just moved into them, and and then COVID hit. 300 employees, and we dispatched them home, which was amazing. That was sort of a highlight to watch, like a light switch get flipped and everyone's successful moving at home. But for me, it's like whiteboarding. I miss whiteboarding. I want my whiteboards in these offices. I can't, my wife won't let me put one up here. So, but in truth, the highlights are watching a team of people, and I stress the word team, like, we just geek together in these offices, and, we're all over each other and in the conference rooms, and, strategizing. And the success we had in, going home, I think in working from home and doing this, like the Zoom, the digital boxes of you all, kind of sucks, but it just proves the interconnectivity of the connections we built. The sort of fabric that we had as, fellow employees, that translates. And the new people who have been found, interviewed, and hired with no physicality, all through Zoom, kind of get that. They can see that, So that was like a truth serum of who we were in the most sort of, tested form when over the internet. So that was a huge highlight.
Great. Before we move on here, I just wanted to remind everyone in the audience that we have that chat box on the right side of your screen. If you've got questions, please pop them in there. We'll have a few minutes at the end to take some audience questions for our panelists. So if you notice I haven't covered something that you're interested in picking their brains on, please use that, and we'll swing back at the end and grab a few. Moving forward here, I'm interested in hearing each of your perspectives on what you think is next for Colorado's tech and startup ecosystem. What trends do you expect to see, or trends that you've already seen that you expect to continue into the new year? And Greg, I'll let you lead us off here.
Yeah, cool. I think I'm probably the elder statesman in the Colorado tech scene. We moved from San Francisco. I helped build a company in the city in like the mid 90s to early 2000s, moved here in 2003, just because Colorado. And the reality was this was a backwater. I'll be quite honest. The capital injection in the area, certainly from a technology perspective, was not here. There was large telco, certainly organic foods. I mean, there were notable things going on. But if you were like me from the Bay Area, you're like, oh God, did I just come to a retirement home? So we've seen, the evolution of the region. I've worked very closely, as Foundry Group, a venture capital firm here that I've worked very closely with over the years, sort of evolved from Mobius into Foundry. You could just see a palatable change. Abby, I also am a Techstars graduate. I took a company through in 2009. And you can, I've been sort of witness to all these evolutions. But Nick, let me answer your direct question, like, what does the future look like? So we're sort of here. The capital, when you really look at the coasts versus the center of the country, where Denver is probably the anchor other than Austin in the center of the country, I think it's still, we're well behind the capital needs of building big business. We clearly have the tax infrastructure, we've got the real estate, we've got all of that. But here's the reality, COVID just blew that up. It doesn't necessarily matter anymore. The hiring and business operation thesis now is shattered in terms of what the future looks like, and that is remote, and that is go get talent. I think board members who are writing big checks to companies are doing so through Zoom. We just raised $100 million this past year in 2020, all through Zoom. First time in my career, like didn't have to do the shuffle with partners, and so the whole model is changing. But when you look at Colorado very specifically, it's still such an attractive place to found, your business, your dream business, whether or not you want operations and physicality here or using it as the epicenter, as a launch point, to other parts of the country. It's very clear that there is an overwhelming ingress still going on, even in the times of COVID, from principally the Bay Area and from New York City into this region, as witnessed by home real estate prices that are astronomical, right? I still can't believe that. But there's still affordable places for people to move with families, which is a lot different than the Bay Area. So the opportunities are there, but those are my sort of top level sort of observations.
Great. Yeah, Judy, why don't you jump in? I think you could probably add some unique perspective to this as well.
Yeah, I mean, Greg is definitely sounds like OG through and through. Funny that a lot of my Bay Area friends are like, wow, you really led the charge in leading. I was like, I left in 2018. I don't know if I'm leading the charge. It was like a pretty safe bet at that point, right? So, I think exactly right. The remote hybrid, I think, will even hopefully accelerate and elevate Denver, Colorado's kind of role that it can play in not only your professional and business trajectory, but hopefully your personal trajectory. The two things that I find super interesting is this idea of, I think a lot of folks say, first SF and then Utah, really, like the community was really driven by just the early wins, the big wins, right? The founders that then just poured everything in terms of their networks and their certainly personal capital into growing that environment. And I think the Colorado region is just about there and having some of these like really early big wins, but then ensuring that they stay connected, that they don't then just jet off to the mountains and never be heard from again, to really drive the community and play a role. So I think that, when I joined the fund, the thesis, like all the LPs in the fund, which we call members, are founders, entrepreneurs, or senior execs that have been through a growth story. And the idea of, even more now of why it's so helpful to have people that have been through it, but especially in your region, I think is something that I definitely will keep my eyes on and play whatever role I can. And then I think, the third thing is this focus on world positive companies has never been more so, right? Not to say the B2B enterprise softwares don't play a critical role in accelerating the world that we want to see. But I think after 2020, whether it's focusing on, medicine, education, or even SMBs, right? This idea of like world positive, pay it forward. What are you doing other than like, selling yourself for $1 billion, that I think is getting a lot of play, that no matter who you are and what you're building, you have to build that into your narrative, which then hopefully actually ends up being your DNA.
Totally. Abby, what trends do you expect to see continue, as we continue in 2021?
Yeah, I'm not expecting to be as additive to this particular question as Greg and Judy, but from the earlier stage perspective, I love that we're seeing more seed funds pop up here. That's some of the most challenging capital to get. Matchstick Ventures, Range, et cetera. That's fantastic for companies like mine. So that's one thing. And I think that obviously, like, the Techstars network is amazing. Any entrepreneurs who have an amazing idea and an amazing team and an MVP, apply to Techstars. It was the best thing I've done in my career, hands down. It was a super experience. And I think the one additional, two more things that I would say, love that Palantir has moved their headquarters here. That's fantastic. It is still very difficult to hire strong developer talent here because Best Shot's taken them all. Just kidding. But no, that's amazing. It's amazing for our industry here. And then, the last thing I would say, there are a lot of people who have done very well financially here. We have a lot of, there are a lot of angels here who are willing to put forward capital into issues that they really believe in. And we're also, like, VC isn't the only place that companies like Best Shot, some companies like that are earlier stage are looking to raise money from. So kind of going along the trend of the angel investor who has done very well financially in their career, also seeing family offices and whatnot. So that's certainly another source of capital that we're excited to see here at Best Shot, just around the Denver Boulder area.
Great. Things that have sort of been weaved into this conversation is, the traits that make Colorado special for this startup and technology community. The next question here, as we see this community and this ecosystem continue to grow and flourish from where it was, as Greg mentioned, 20 years ago to where it is now, what are some of the key tenets that make this community special that you hope to see maintained moving forward as it grows and as bigger players land here? And Abby, why don't you take us on this one first?
Yeah, this is a great question, Nick. So I'll kind of start off by telling you a quick anecdote. So I moved here in 2011, and I was 25 years old, and I would be at parties, meeting people. I was, young and, trying to make friends. I moved here sight unseen, like, I'm an Aries, like, natural born entrepreneur type person. So I was like, oh, this sounds like an adventure. I'll probably go back to the East Coast and, go to business school. Spoiler alert, that did not happen. I stayed here and worked for a bunch of startups and then started my own. But so I would go to these parties and people would say, like, what do you do? And, my answer to them was, well, I worked for Merrill Lynch on Wall Street, and I moved here to, be employee 12 at this really high growth energy company and blah, 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 blah. And they totally just didn't listen to that. They were like, no, like, do you hike? Do you ski? Like, what do you like to read? Like, would you be interested in coming to a game night? And I was like, wait, nobody cares what I do for a living. Like, they care about the whole person. And I think that is just really what's so amazing about Colorado. And I'm from Texas. Like, you'd think you'd find that in Texas too, but you don't. It's totally, totally unique to Colorado. And I love it here. People are willing to, lend a helping hand. It is neighborly. So I think that tenet of just being neighborly and saying, hey, okay, from a startup perspective, we are not incredibly proximate to Sand Hill Road. So like, let's all, kind of join together, share resources, share ideas, see where we can help each other. So, I think in the past few years, what I've seen in the Colorado startup ecosystem, those are the tenets that I hope will carry through.
Awesome. Yeah, Greg, I'll kick it over to you. What have you seen here that you hope to see maintained even as more people land here and more big players come?
Yeah, Abby nailed it, but I'll sort of add some color to that. There is a DNA here, which is, I think, Judy, you said this, it's give first. It was remarkable when I moved here. You have to really contrast the aggressiveness and almost secretive nature of certainly Bay Area, where I was from. Anyone and everyone will attempt to eat your lunch. So you quite honestly don't know what you're saying in a lunch line in some, cafes in San Francisco. You really have to be careful. That is absolutely not if someone is overheard talking technology, they will butt in. How can I help? I am here to help you. Capital, ideas, like what that's so cool. Like let me help, And there is I just fell into that. I contributed to it. Foster it because I feel it's the way of evolution. Like I won't get all meta, but it's the way that society needs to sort of evolve, like in business too. Inversely, like Colorado has carried with it, largely this sort of stigma, which is it's more playtime, less work time. And there are absolute reasons why we moved to this epically beautiful part of the country to enjoy its natural riches, for sure. I'm still working 80 hours a week. like you are who you are. Like, you find time. The one thing that I love seeing by the most successful entrepreneurs here are those that they demonstrate this incredible balance to work, to inspire, to lead, but take care of themselves too, right? That's like, why, our family is well rooted here.
Awesome. Judy, I'll send it your way. I imagine you'll parrot a lot of what we heard so far, but would love to hear your perspective as well.
In very specific ways, similar to Abby, I moved to Denver having never been here before, ever. And we bought our house via Facetime tour. So the what could go wrong type of mentality I completely share. And then also this idea of the 3D people that you find out here. I think, the people that tend to stick in the Bay Area versus move to Austin or Colorado are those that don't want tech or their careers to be 100% of their soul. And I think, in your 20s or early in your career, you may think I need it to be 100% of my soul, but I just the very interesting people with really rich experience has been one of the best things ever. And then the other thing that Greg said is so true of, the community. What I've seen is it is all about helping each other succeed. When I moved here, I didn't know anybody, never been here before. And I sent an email to, Lee Mayer of Havenly. And I was like, hi, do you want to be my friend? And she said, sure, come to my office. And then she became my friend and then introduced me to all these fantastic people that then go on to start companies, raise a fund. And it's just everything just started in these pockets and really bloomed because, I think when there is so much competition, neuroses, whatever it is in the Bay Area, bless that area, is that you're obviously a lot more just like, what's in it for me angle, what's everybody else doing, everything is about, you know, you and what have you raised. Whereas here, I think because we're all sort of growing together and growing the ecosystem together in a very much rising tide, there's such a rising tide raises all boats mentality here. It's bananas. Like, more companies that come here, or the more founders that start things here, or the more, you know, venture capital dollars go here, it's all better for us because more people come and more cool things. And that's such a great mentality that I've seen that hopefully stays, right? Like, maybe people are saying this was what, you know, New York was in the 90s or Bay Area was in the 80s. And now it no longer is. So hopefully we won't be having that conversation in a decade's time about Colorado.
Yeah, and Judy, you took the words right out of my mouth there with the rising tide lifts all boats. I guess, you know, a quick follow-up, and whoever wants to take this can, you know, are you concerned at all that as this ecosystem grows and matures that, you know, that ethos will be lost?
Let me just jump in since I'm the one that kicked that open. I think for as long as you have the challenger mentality, right? Like, you're not, you know, no one has anointed Denver to be the, you know, the hub of innovation forever, the way that certain cities around the world may have. And I think for as long as you have that sort of challenger mentality, or, you know, chip on your shoulder in a healthy way, there will always be I think a spirit of helping each other succeed, because it's certainly, like, I definitely will draft off and freely borrow off of your successes and be like, oh my God, I'm in the same city as Greg Keller, what? So I think that for as long as we have that sort of mentality, we'll maintain it.
I think
Awesome.
the calculus is easy. Everyone should aspire to buy and drive crappy Toyota trucks. No more Range Rovers, no more, just forget your East and West Coasts. Be Colorado. But I joke. I mean, yeah, the threat is real, but that's like the NIMBY style attitude, Nick. You know, not in my backyard. Don't bring the Bay Area over here, you know? Right. It's about who you are and the comfort by which you don't deviate, and you present yourself for all the reasons why you live and thrive here. And it's a slow process, but you know, I do very, very much think this region is special, just for, you know, the sort of homebodiness, and that it's how people go about, you know, their relationships here. It's radically different, you know. So just, I would say, present your most unique Coloradan self, and good things happen.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is I think there's, and you know, this is a bit of that kind of challenger mentality that Judy spoke of, but you know, I think that, like, be humble, be curious. I think Coloradans are already like that. I wasn't super humble or super curious when I moved here, but I became that way. And I don't know why I wasn't. Like, I was 25, like, what was I thinking? But, you know, you kind of like take in what's around you. So I think if we, you know, those of us who have started businesses and, you know, grown successful businesses in Colorado, if we can continue to just be humble and be curious, the rest will follow suit.
Awesome. Yeah, you know, to everyone in the audience, I see the questions flowing in on the right, so thank you for that. I've got one more question here for our panelists, and then we'll jump into those questions. So if you haven't already and you want to ask a question, please drop that in the chat, and we'll get through as many as we can. But my last question here for all of our panelists from my end is sort of you know, leaning on your experiences. So what advice would you offer someone either entering the startup world or somebody already in it? And Judy, why don't you take us?
Well, I think I've always sort of held this belief, but 2020 has confirmed it for me, which is the preciousness of time. And I am even more so now telling everyone, like, wonderful if you succeed quickly and see the proof points along the way very quickly. But if not, do not invent momentum and fail fast and move on. You may look like you're 21, but you're not. And so just like what is worthy of you and what is worthy of your time. And the minute that you start to see that this is not what the world needs, move on to the next thing, not to abandon this altogether, but like you can't invent momentum. And then I think the second thing, maybe a little bit related, is that you also cannot invent problems. I hesitate a little bit sometimes when I think about this or when I think through this, is obviously we all as entrepreneurs have to have the imagination of the world that you want to see and the world that you think ought to exist, but carefully balance that with like, what is the clear problem that if I polled 100 other people, they can say that sentence fully of that is a problem. And if that's unclear, that is not a problem, right? Like you cannot invent something that you think ought to exist unless you have a very smart way of getting about, typically, which is endless capital, of how to, force it into being. And so whether that's a clear, revenue path right out of the gate, business plan right out of the gate, I don't think any of us are afforded the whole, don't worry about, revenue and just get traction unless you're the once a year ridiculous product market fit unicorn. So those are probably the two things that I, have as the most advice, both personally in terms of my own experiences, but certainly now in looking at new companies, of please say the sentence back to me of, of what is the provable momentum and the clear problem that you are out there solving.
Awesome. Abby, how about you? What advice would you offer?
Oh, that was gold, Judy. That's amazing. Stealing that. So I think, from my perspective, okay, so, there's something called founder market fit, and I have it. So I was an IVF patient. I struggled with medication and mental health challenges, and then I started a business. My co-founder was the founding technologist of RX Review. He knows how to build data models for pharmaceuticals. That's what we're trying to do. So we have incredible founder market fit as co-founders in this business, but we are nowhere, literally nowhere, without our army of mentors. And I feel like, Greg and I are kind of like, this has been like a bit of a Techstars advertisement, but, this was something that like, it was hammered into our heads going through Techstars, and especially launching our business through Techstars. Like, it's all about giving first, and it's all about leveraging your mentors. And we've talked at length about how Colorado is unique in that, but like legitimately would be nowhere without probably like 10 or 12 people who have helped us shape this business and who continue to help us shape our business every single day. Something I was really bad at, earlier on in my career, was asking stupid questions. I try to ask the stupidest questions I can possibly think of every single day to this army of mentors, because like, what do you have to lose? This is your business. So my best advice is just to find that who will give up themselves to you, and know that once you've been a successful entrepreneur, you'll pay it forward too.
Great. Greg, go ahead.
Yep, both Judy and Abby, sage wisdom. I'll just keep it quick too, because that was exactly like sort of my points. But if I am to add anything, they're sort of in two camps. One, I live by two mantras. One is abstract for anyone to really think about. The other is probably a little bit more software technology entrepreneurial focused. The abstract one is progression over perfection. Just keep moving forward. Keep iterating, keep pushing until you have successfully achieved product market fit. And that is critical. I mean, that is, the spark that happens when the money machine starts to occur. The other on the technology sort of entrepreneurial side is that I was coached, and I radically failed at this one in one of my ventures, was this. It's this very simple model. And you should ask yourself this: are you building a feature? Are you building a product? Or are you building a categorical changing business? And very often the myopic pain, or the acute pain, I should say, that an entrepreneur is feeling, it can result in building a business that is focused on a feature, and the business never truly achieves the liftoff that you possibly could have imagined. Products are wonderful, but again, have their own sort of baggage, their own limitation. When you really think about the large tectonic movements in industry, those are the things you want to shake. Those are the things that require reinvention or different alternative or orthogonal ways to come about the solution. And there's so many vectors of technology that are enabling this: the cloud, remote operations, like it's endless now in terms of the possibilities to shake old pre-existing categories to their core. If I'm an entrepreneur today, like I'm super excited, but those are some, maybe abstract guideposts I would recommend.
Great. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers all the questions I had for the three of you on my list. So we'll jump in here to some questions from the audience. Anyone listening, don't hesitate to pop some more questions in there as we go. We still have, a handful of a little bit of time here, so we'll continue sorting through those and picking out some to ask our panelists. But one here for all of you at the start, and Judy, you mentioned how much of a social person you are and how challenging that has been for you, but that you found a way. Would love to hear from all of you, how you're engaging with your communities, how you're connecting with your communities when we're all sort of forced to do it from 4 blocks on a screen like we are today.
I can kick that off.
Cool.
What have I been doing? I mean, I say, it's really funny. I've always, like, over the past few years, right? There's been this zeitgeist of teaching people how to say no, right? Especially women, by the way. And nothing great in my life has happened because I said no, right? And so in this environment, because it's digital, it's so much easier to say yes. So there's pretty much very few events that I'm like, oh, I'll definitely check it out and sign on at least, right? I do a lot of walk and talks now, like the mask 6 feet apart, and we like scream at each other because you're outdoors and you're behind a mask and you're 6 feet apart. But I do actually a lot of that, and to the extent anyone's comfortable, I suggest that first. Those are the main things, but I think it's, again, because the threshold is lower, you don't have to get on a plane. The actuality is most people are more open to at least having a conversation than previously, when it was just so precious because you had to get into a room together.
Great. Greg, Abby, anything to add there?
I do a lot of like park and talks, like in parks. Like our parks in Colorado are amazing, so I do a lot of that. And I think on the personal side, I feel like I've never been in closer touch with friends than I am now, and that's really been a bright spot. I have Zoom calls with my best friends from high school every week and my best friends from college every week. So that's been just really wonderful. And Zoom, FaceTime, that's how I'm keeping in touch with my community. That's the only way.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, I have nothing really material to add. The technologies are helping us just bridge these gaps. I miss my mom. I haven't seen her in ages, and these are very, very trying parts of our lives. But FaceTime and Zoom, they're an elixir, at least for now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We have a couple of questions here that piggyback on a point that we made earlier about companies that do good. Having a moment here as we move forward. One question here says, sorry, one sec. As a nonprofit which looks to enhance lives of adults with cancer, we certainly have that world positive view. Do you see more of a social justice perspective and philanthropic initiatives within this tech entrepreneur group? And feel free to chime in, whoever wants to go first.
So let me interpret the question. Do I see it or do I anticipate it?
Either one. Take it whichever way you'd like.
I absolutely anticipate that what we've all learned and gone through, there's no doubt capital is going to be diverted to these kinds of problems. And of them all, I believe mental health is probably the most stressed part, not only of our healthcare system, but it's the widest exposure of our humanity right now, is just how to deal and how to cope. And without it, everything degrades. Family ties, ability to execute in business. My anticipation is you're going to see a more strong movement towards diverting capital. Some will be technology focused, and other will be more socially conscious focused. But that's my prediction.
Yeah, I think that's right as well. And I think, uniquely in Colorado, we have a really healthy digital health ecosystem, and, not exactly social justice, but, I think we're doing a world of good for, people who are sick, people who are not well. And that it's a particularly strong community here in Denver. And, there are accelerators, there are organizations, there are meetups all over the place. And, that connective tissue is really healthy here. And I'm excited to, kind of work together as a community with other digital health companies to break down some of the ridiculous barriers that we face in digital health. They are significant, and it will take an army. So, but it's exciting to have that community here in Denver. So I definitely see that growing.
Judy, anything to add?
Yeah, I think the question as it relates to nonprofits specifically is both I hear more than ever companies being started that are aimed at accelerating or easing the path of nonprofit businesses is something that's interesting. And then I also think this other idea of just companies, organizations individually having so much more cognition of understanding what the health writ large needs of people are, and their employees specifically, that there's probably even more willingness to carve out just philanthropic initiatives as it relates to partnering with nonprofits.
Great. We've got a couple minutes left here. Before we get out of here, I want to give each of you a chance to sort of tell us what's next for you and your companies. Would love to hear sort of what the rest of 2021 looks like and your outlook for each of your companies and organizations. Greg, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, it's an exciting time. JumpCloud, again, has been around for a little bit. We have a number of employees here in Colorado, roughly about 300 folks. But we went from March, when COVID happened, prior to March, 100% of our employee base was here in Colorado. We're now in 12 states. So the future looks extremely bright with a massive foundation here in Colorado, but being able to acquire talent in other hubs. These are one of the sort of silver linings, if there is one, of a pandemic, or at least a forced way to rethink things. As I kind of previously mentioned, the company raised a fairly significant amount of money recently. We had an oversubscribed round, which translates to we weren't necessarily looking to raise money, but the type of solution we built happened to solve a lot of problems for companies struggling to think about their remote operations. It's kind of what we built. Again, I think Abby said this best. We weren't anticipating a pandemic. It came to us. So the real execution on our front now, it relies on myself and my team, principally product and engineering resources, to sort of expand and go and build out more of the stuff that our customers are asking us for. And this is sort of our moment, our opportunity to go and do that.
Great. Judy, go ahead, and we got a chat here as well. Someone asking to remind them of your name and the companies you're involved with. So that included with your outlook for the remainder of this year.
I'll wrap up that. I'm Greg Keller, the CTO of JumpCloud.
Nick, you tapped me. So Judy here, I'm the founder of Money Girls and a partner at thefund.vc. So as it relates to Money Girls and what I'm building, I mean, 2020 has made it so clear to me, the mission of accelerating the financial and wealth building, you know, the financial futures of undervalued, let's call it, people. A lot of that happens to be kind of, you know, up and coming professional women, young women, which is my obsession. You know, we obviously have not only seen just the unstable financial footing of a lot of people, but also even the big guys, the Robin Hoods and whoever's the world, they've also had some ups and downs over 2020, right? And so I think my obsession of our mission in terms of accelerating their financial health and their financial confidence through building the right networks and tools has never been more real. And I think for 2021, my focus is on you know, whether through partnerships or other kind of modalities, just being faster about connecting them with the tools. So that's, you know, as the entrepreneur had in me, the investor had in me with the fund is I am now like 2 feet in just understanding all the founders that are building cool things here and getting up to speed on just all these industries that previously I had never had the luxury of understanding, like senior care and SMB marketing solutions and all these different things where I'm like, oh. The good thing about that is I think over the past 15 years of just my career, I've built enough of a network where there's pretty much no category of business where I can't think of at least one name that is an expert that I can call. And so my kind of focus will be certainly on meeting more people doing cool things, and to the extent that they are not the standard entrepreneurial, you know, cliche of a profile, then all the better. And I hope I have a chance to meet you.
Great. Abby, over to you to bring us home here, your outlook for the remainder of this year.
Awesome. Abby Mercado, co-founder and CEO of Best Shot. Man, I'm so excited about 2021. I'm so excited. It's a new year. I guess first off, today we released an application for patients on the App Store and the Google Play Store. So go download it, give us 5 stars, please. That'd be awesome. I'm really excited about what is going on in the consumer digital pharmacy. So we're heavily looking into that space. Fertility pharmaceuticals are, you know, just like fraught with misinformation, complex. Like you take 50 injectables that you're preparing and administering in the span of, you know, 2 weeks. That's insane. What are all of these drugs doing to our bodies? How do you get them easier? Like all of these things. So hard. There's so much more white space in this market, and we're excited to do it better. Also, just really excited about the size of our market. There's been a rush for young women to freeze their eggs during the pandemic, and it has been really exciting, you know, seeing our market get that much bigger. Not just focused on infertility, but focused on egg preservation. So that's just super thrilling. And then, you know, to kind of hit on something that Greg mentioned earlier, where we are focused on mental health, like very, very focused on mental health. We are really excited to commercialize a mental health product as it relates to fertility and as it relates to specialty medicine. So we've got a really exciting 2021 coming up. So
that's great.
Fantastic. Before we wrap up here and send everyone on their way, I just wanted to say that this event is part of a kickoff for Colorado Inno's 3rd annual Startups to Watch list. This list is one of our favorite posts every year, and it highlights 21 startups that we think are poised to make headlines in 2021. Whether that means huge funding rounds, acquisitions, or new products that will shake up their respective industries, these are the startups we think you'll hear from over these next 11 and a half months or so. You know, we leaned in on our network of industry experts, some VCs, accelerators, and others, along with our own internal reporting to put this list together. And it covers a range of startups from across the state, from across industries with varying levels of funding. So keep an eye out for that list coming out shortly after this. Yeah, and that pretty much brings us to the end here. I just wanted to thank our sponsor, Amica, again for everything, and thank our fantastic panelists for taking part in today's event. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.